Welcome to the podcast. My guest is James Bravelove. He's the founder of Alpha Rising Menswork. James is a former professional skier. His skiing career ended abruptly after breaking his neck in a severe mountain bike crash back in 2012. His journey of recovery from that injury helped James discover his passion for working with men in group coaching. Today, through his company Alpha Rising Menswork and his podcast Men Doing the Work, James is on a mission to help men level up in all areas of life. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I have James Bravelove on the show today of Alpha Rising. Really excited to talk to him about some sports psychology, about men's groups, about some really interesting stuff. You're going to love this. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's just kick it off. Tell us a little bit about Alpha Rising, what you do.
Awesome. Happy to. So Alpha Rising is all about men's work. It's all about helping guys come back to their hearts is really the core of it. Just doing the work, as they say, learning to understand more about ourselves, going deep, like understanding your story, understanding your limiting beliefs, your patterns, all these things that kind of keep us separate from other people and hold us back from achieving what we want in life. So a big part of it is emotional intelligence as well. There's a lot of guys out there that have been programmed to just make money, success, like create success, get shit done, having just that outward focus all the time instead of going in, understanding their emotions, understanding their anger and their sadness, and being able to connect with people at more of an emotional level and just everything around that, because that really helps us connect with the people in our life and build better relationships, be happier, all that fun stuff.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. We're talking just before recording here about men's groups, and I'm just starting to get into that myself, in realizing the power of a group of men getting together, talking about some really difficult stuff, normalizing it, being vulnerable, as cliche as that sounds these days. There's a lot of power in that. And just speaking of vulnerability, I was reading about your bio and your sports background, and really empathizing with some parts of it. Your injury, your mountain bike injury, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a mountain bike injury too. So I literally could feel your pain. Broke my leg mountain biking probably about 12 years ago, and first major injury I've ever had. But so I feel your pain literally, and I think that is a big topic. Talk a lot about sports psychology. I want to ask you about that. Just first about your skiing background, competitive skier, you're really good at it, and then subsequently having that injury, which for a lot of men, if you have a major injury like that, it's really difficult to deal with. Especially for professional athletes, of just feeling that loss of control and things like that. But before we go getting a little depressing on that, I want to hear about just like your skiing background. I assume you did some sports before that, but how did you get into the skiing?
Not really by choice. I've been skiing since I was about 2 years old. So my parents were both instructors. My grandfather managed a ski resort. Like it was in my blood. and and I just, so it was there from an early age, but I really fell in love with it. I lived in Ontario, so we had a lot of night skiing close by. So in all through high school, I would just be out there every day after school in the winter and just skiing. And I was a teenager right about the time when free skiing was first kind of coming out and being a thing, and twin tips got created. And so I was watching the ski videos, I was seeing all these pros, and I fell in love and just had this dream of going and becoming a pro skier and doing that whole thing. So as soon as I turned 18, I moved to Whistler, BC, where I spent 11 years coaching, competing, filming, just chasing that whole lifestyle, and had some sponsors, got paid a little bit, but still very much the ski world is there's not that many people that make it their entire career. It's quite a long track to get to that point. And so I was also, doing all sorts of other things alongside that. And until, as we kind of touched on, I broke my neck in 2012, and that really just threw everything for a huge curveball.
Yeah, so. That's intense, man. Breaking your neck. Yeah, and were you really competitive skiing at that time?
I filmed a bit. I was like in that kind of realm of like I wanted to. I was more into filming and big mountain skiing rather than park and stuff. I was more into park and half pipe and jumps and rails and all that when I was younger. That's all there is in Ontario. But as I moved out west, I kind of got more into big mountain and more into coaching. I worked with the Whistler Free Ride Club, so I coached athletes that competed in big mountain skiing and traveled around North America. And one of my guys actually won the world championships for the under 18. So
Nice.
it was like they got better than me by a long shot. And then just, managing these little egos and kind of supporting these guys and kind of being like I'm sure you're familiar and I talk to people in this. It's like I was in this role between coach and big brother and father, almost like, supporting these guys, because a lot of them I worked with, for 5-6 years on their whole rise through getting sponsors and getting into this whole like competitive professional athlete world. And for a teenage boy, that's it's a lot to take on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you, like you said, almost had no choice. You were brought up with it. You started skiing when you're like 2 or 3 and it's kind of in your blood. And
Totally.
that's it's similar to my story as well. I got started in bicycle racing at age 12, really early. And I think that when you grow up with something like that, you kind of can't help but be pretty good at it if you start that young. And if you're in that community too, just it becomes normal, it becomes like, like a second nature. And so you basically you found, it sounds like, or also were discovering like you liked coaching and being kind of like a big brother mentor while you're doing like a natural affinity toward
Yeah,
coaching.
I always knew I was good at being patient with people while they're learning. And a big part of coaching skiing is helping coach people through their fears. Helping, it's all about mindset and being calm and being able to focus on the steps that you got to do and take action and grow. And just the feeling that I would get from helping people overcome their fears and learn new things, and the huge smiles on people's faces when they've just tackled a new thing or like added a notch to their belt of all the tricks they can do, land their first backflip, whatever it is. It's just it filled my heart so much. Like just seeing people just just have those peak experiences, and so that translated really easily into the rest of the coaching. Again, when I went through my big the accident and kind of spiritual awakening, which happened throughout that as well, it was like, okay, how can I take all these skills that I have in already coaching people through hard stuff into now more like healing and personal development and just helping them be better men out there. So
Yeah. Well, they really go hand in hand. And I think that's something that is missing from a lot of like sports coaching is frankly that spiritual aspect or the healing or the more holistic approach to like athletes are humans too. And if you're just focusing on performance all the time, it's almost counterintuitive. You can actually get better performance out of working on some other aspects of your life, really, because then you're able to really focus your energy, because there's a lot of things out there, stress, that can really rob your energy and focus. So I love that story of just like discovering, this sounds a little corny, but like a blessing in disguise. So you get injured, and that gives you, like the spiritual awakening and taps into the other aspects of sports performance. Can you tell us a little bit about that injury, the journey, and yeah, the awakening, and a little bit more about that? Yeah.
for sure, it was a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was mountain biking. It wasn't actually skiing, as you mentioned, and it rocked me for sure. There was a big chunk of time that was in this kind of like just super depressed, super like my whole life was built around skiing and using my body, and then all of a sudden not even knowing if I'd be able to walk properly again, let alone ski at all, let alone ski at a similar level. And it really had me question everything and refocus my life, where I was going. It's like, especially as you mentioned, being on this path of being an athlete, that's your path. And then it also becomes your identity. So then to try to think about doing something completely different, it just rocks it all. And so there was some challenge for sure. I'd been through a lot of injuries before that, so I had a pretty good handle on the mental health side and like on I knew enough I'd had my fair share of like early on where I just got depressed and would drink or, like not pay any regard to my health and just go downhill. And I learned before this that the importance of just keeping your mind straight, eating well, nutrition, working out, like other parts, whatever's not injured, to like stay active and stay healthy and keep your blood flowing and all that kind of stuff. So as soon as I was able to, I was definitely on that train and went way down, like way into nutrition even more, and supplementation, and getting as much as I could to help my body heal. And there was a couple of pieces I mentioned around the spirituality aspect. There was a friend of mine that came in and started gifting me Reiki sessions, which were like energy healing
Yeah.
essentially. I
Yeah.
started to learn more about that. I learned more about meditation and specifically the power of the mind with regard to healing, with regard to how you think about your body that's broken. So many people, the really big thing that hit me in there is, and I had been super guilty of this before as well, a lot of people when they get injured, they're like, ah, oh, stupid knee, like, why did you get hurt? And they get like literally angry at their body. They're sending a piece of their body like negativity and anger and all these things. Versus if you can treat yourself like you would a good friend who's injured, it works a lot better. Like if your good friend of yours got hurt, you wouldn't be like, you idiot, like, why did you do that? You'd be like, oh man, I'm sorry. Like, what can I do to help you? How can I support? What do you need? I'm here for you. And if you can take that same kind of mindset to yourself and to the part of your body that's healing, it actually, there's like science around this, that it speeds up the healing process tremendously. So I got big into that, and as well, cannabis came into my life at that point as well. I had a friend gift me a huge bag of trimmings. So apparently, I didn't know at the time, but he had a little grow up of his own, and I took that and kind of added it, infused it into one of those big Costco size things of coconut oil, and that became my medicine. I really wanted to get off of I didn't want to have any pharmaceutical painkillers, or I wanted to be as present as I could with what was going on. And that also helped me kind of shift from this like being frustrated about my situation to just accepting my situation, and okay, like thinking about now what, not just like resisting it and being resentful about it, but like, okay, I'm here, I can't really move, I'm just lying in bed staring at the ceiling all day, like what can I at least do to keep my mind busy? So I got into audiobooks and podcasts and started learning about nutrition, about healing, about mindset, meditation. Like I just started going down a rabbit hole of at least exercising my mind until I could start exercising my body a little bit and build up kind of core strength and all these things that I wasn't using for the first chunk of time, and just really focused on where I was going and where I wanted to go out of it. And as I said, that just opened up a whole rabbit hole of learning more about health, nutrition, mindset, meditation, getting into personal development space more, and eventually transitioning into life coaching and NLP and all the work that I do now. So it was again, it wasn't like, I'm not upset at all about that happening now. It was literally one of the best things that's ever happened to me,
Yeah.
because I was almost 30 at that point, and like the track of a professional skier, especially with the toll it takes on your body, is like, if you haven't made it by that point, there's very few people that really crack through in their mid to late 30s. So I was at a point where I needed to start doing something different with my life, and that gave me the nudges to start moving in the direction that I am in, have gone now. And now just have this beautiful life living here in Costa Rica and getting to surf every day and getting to help guys improve their lives, improve their relationships. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that happening. So I'm very grateful for it.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I mean, it's the way you took advantage of it, because it's so common, the stories you hear about athletes getting depressed after an injury, even a minor injury. But it makes me think of say like Michael Jordan a little bit, of when he got he got injured, he broke his foot like his second or third season playing, and his mental attitude was like, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to pivot, I'm going to direct all of my energy in a positive direction. Like you said, you went down this rabbit hole, like a positive rabbit hole of like, all right, let me not take painkillers, let me try Reiki, let me try all these things. And you really leverage the opportunity. And that's just a powerful story that, I mean, you can share that with your clients now, and you're sharing it right here. And athletes are listening, like take James's story, and it is possible. Like if you get injured, there is some sort of an opportunity in that, right? You don't necessarily know what it is, but it could be some sort of personal development. Like if you want to look at it as an opportunity, because like you said, you could be angry at the situation, you could resist it, but what that does is you're not really accepting the reality of what's been given to you at the moment, right? And if you look hard enough, there's a lot of things, a lot of opportunities there. So that's a fantastic story. I love that, and I'm sure that that helps a lot of men in your business. That's cool. I know you want to talk about surfing. You got your surfboard in the background, and specifically, you've been getting really into it. And I want to ask you how you apply some of your knowledge you've learned over the years toward getting better at surfing. I've tried surfing, and boy, it's a steep learning curve. So, so tell us a little bit about some of the techniques you use to stay calm or get better at surfing or up your level.
100%. Thanks for asking.
Sure.
I've definitely fallen in love with surfing now. It's taken a while for sure. It's a long learning curve, I find. Things like skiing and snowboarding, they're painful, and you bail a lot, you get hurt a lot at the beginning, but you quite quickly get to a point of somewhat proficiency where you can at least make it down the hill and kind of turn and things like that, usually within a couple of weeks if you have some decent athletic ability, because you're just working with gravity all the time. The surfing is a very different sport entirely, because you have to develop a lot of different muscles than you use anywhere else in life. Like so many of our sports are like forward, kind of hunched over, and computers and phones, like we have all this like forward hunched over posture all the time, and surfing is so much different because it's so up and back and using your whole back chain so much and doing cardio with your arms. Like when else do you do that in any sport? So a big part of the learning curve was just actually gaining the strength required to be able to paddle and make it out to the back and navigate the ocean, because it's always changing. Everything is happening right now versus looking at something, planning what you're going to do, and then going and doing it. A couple of the big mindset pieces that I brought into it that really helped me with learning quickly, I believe, is actually stuff that I teach my clients as far in life in general. One is to focus on just putting in the reps. A lot of people want to rush to get to a destination. Like in surfing, you can be at the back where the waves, they call them green waves, where they haven't broken yet. And like, if you ever watch surfing, that's what you're watching. But when you're learning, you usually hang out in the middle in what's called the whitewater area, where the waves have already broken and you're just practicing popping up. You're practicing paddling out through them. You're practicing just the basics of learning to pop up, getting your strength down, getting your balance down, learning to just stand on the board. And there's so much of this. Like the basics take a long time to master in this sport. And the more you've mastered the basics, the easier it's going to be to go and do the big, like the green waves in the back. But if you rush to try to get to the back, it's going to be scary. You're not going to know what you're doing. You're not going to get as much practice on the basics. So it's actually going to take longer to learn. So for me, I really just tried to take on this mindset of focus on the basics and stayed inside, like in the whitewater area, longer than I maybe needed to. And even once I was going to the back, every day I would go and catch at least 10 waves in the middle before going to the back and playing in the green wave section, just to, again, like really focus on that idea of practicing the basics, which, for surfing has helped me get quite proficient quite quickly. And it's such a life thing as well. So many people are rushing to get to the next thing, rushing to get to the next level, learn the new trick or whatever it is, or master the next, get the promotion, get the, the bigger house, the bigger car, or whatever they're chasing, as opposed to just focusing on getting better at what they're doing right now. That's a big one. Another one that came in from skiing and from everything else that I've been involved in my life is purposefully bringing in the energy of play. If you're playing, if you're laughing, if you're having fun, you actually learn way faster, like 6 to 8 times faster. There's when you're in that energy of play and having fun, and you probably talked about this with other guests, I'm sure as well, you just create new neural connections a lot faster, and you have fun. So you're also having fun while you're doing it. So, you accomplish your goal faster, you enjoy the process more, and you get to that place where you're doing bigger things faster. Instead of, a lot of people go out and try to, there's a lot of this like grind mentality in the world, especially in entrepreneurship and all these things, and I'm sure in the sport world as well, where it's like, if you're not suffering, you're not trying hard enough. And it's like, that can apply to certain things, and pushing yourself in the gym, and there's certain elements where like that can be helpful. But when you're learning, especially, bringing in this energy of play, it's so helpful. It helps you perform better, because you're not pushing something, you're not struggling, you're just laughing and enjoying yourself. And that goes a long way towards enjoying the process more and performing better, because you're more in flow state, and you're having a good time. So it's easier to just to do it well, and to have fun with it, and have it go smoothly. So
Right.
those are
Yeah.
two of the ones. That and just consistency. I made a real strong decision to just go for it. And we're super blessed in the town we live. Nosara is, you can surf at any tide, anytime, basically, as long as there's waves, which pretty much happens all year round, except for a little bit in the rainy season. It gets too like big and stormy and hectic that it's just not really worth going out. But pretty much all year you can surf any time of the day, whenever you want. A lot of places, there's only a certain window in the tides, like there's maybe twice a day for a couple hours where it actually works to surf. Here we can go anytime, and it's a beach break as well, so you're always paddling out through the waves instead of just going around at a point break. And so it's been a beautiful place to learn, and just it's been really easy to make it part of my morning routine. So I'm in there every day at like 6 a.m., go for a surf for an hour or so before work, and just steadily keep getting better, and having fun while I'm doing it.
Well, I can tell you really enjoy it just by the way you're describing it. I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds like you're really loving it. And I love what you said about making it more playful, and that you actually do learn quicker and better. And it's that counterintuitive thing. It's like, well, if I'm more serious, and if I grind and I'm really serious about this, I'm going to learn more. But what that does is it makes you kind of stiff. It makes you worry about failure, which kind of increases fear, which reduces learning time. So I love that you're making it playful. Also, what you said too, I really like about the process. Like, especially when you're learning something or up leveling, there's always a process, and you got to really respect it, right? So like, it's just a reality. Like, if you're starting a new sport or even up leveling in a sport, like, there's a process, and use patience. Patience is frowned upon sometimes, especially in today's sort of grind hustle culture, like, F patience, all this kind of stuff. But it's like, if you understand that there is a physical reality to the process, and that if you're putting in the basics and the reps, that lays the foundation. So the metaphor of a house with a strong foundation is going to be more stable over time, and then you're going to have less to worry about. So I love that description of surfing. It's kind of making me want to surf. I'm here in Naples, Florida, and there's probably not as good as Costa Rica surfing, but yeah, that's awesome story. I want to ask you, James, about just the concept of leveling up, for not necessarily for athletes, but just in maybe what you do, of men who want to achieve something, and they might be stuck, or there might be some barriers to that. Like, they have the desire, they have the talent, they have the time, so like everything's basically possible. Have you seen in your work some common barriers to leveling up for people, be it in sports or in their careers or their marriage or whatever, of just going to that next level of getting some more skills? Any barriers that you see?
100%. One of the biggest ones that I see, which I like to teach at the beginning of any program that I do, is this idea of being teachable or being coachable. There's a lot of people that are stuck because they're really attached to their way of doing things. They're not willing to admit that they might be wrong, or that they might have something to learn they need to be doing in order to be at that next level. If you're at a certain level, there's a certain level of beliefs and expectations and knowledge and skills and everything that's gotten you to that point. If you want to move up to the next level, there's going to be different skills, different beliefs, different ways of being that are going to allow you to do that. And you, not that what you're doing is wrong necessarily, but it's this mindset of being willing to admit that you might be wrong, being willing to admit that you don't know everything and you don't have all the answers, you don't have all the skills, you're not perfect. You have room to grow, you have room to learn. And when you take that and combine it with the willingness to put in the work and to put in the reps, as I talked about, and just focus on the steps, be consistent, it's a very similar piece of whatever you want to get better at, you got to practice, and you got to put in that effort of doing the reps and learning the skills, learning the habits, learning the ways of doing it in order to get to that next level. And a lot of people, especially as they raise in ability, like your ego will raise usually alongside that. So, if you're in like the top 50 athletes in the world, you're already think you're pretty damn good because you're better than the 99% of the other ones. But if you want to get to that top 5, that top 2, 3 athletes in the world, it's like you need to learn more. You need to learn something. You need to put in a little bit more effort. You need to practice that much harder. You need to have that much more like work that goes into the skills that the people that are in that place have that you don't. And you have to be willing to check your ego and say, okay, I still have things to learn. I'm willing to be teachable. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to just practice the basics still until getting to, and maybe not like the absolute basics, but like that energy of practicing whatever maybe it's like in road riding, like there's some level where, some certain type of pass or some like, your cardio isn't quite as good as it could be, or your power, or, like your VO2 max needs to get raised a little bit or something along those lines, that you got to be willing to just put in that work that sometimes isn't fun. But if you can bring the fun energy to it, it'll go a lot smoother. But just again, being willing to admit that you don't have it all figured out and you have things to learn, that kind of humbleness, really.
Yeah, no, it is. It's about being coachable, really, like you say. So that what got you to the current level that you're at, your grit, your determination, and whatever it is, may not get you to the next level. It may help, but you may need to bring in some more stuff. And having that open mind and having a coach like yourself who is able to, you have all this experience, you can see some of the ego traps that can be helpful. But ultimately, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, ultimately it is up to the person that you're coaching if they are coachable. Like you can try and you can say, hey, how about this? How about this? And if they're not really willing to have a flexible mindset, be open-minded, might not be able to coach them, right?
And put in the work. Like
Right.
you can show someone the door, but they have to walk through it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big piece about having coaches. Like most of your audience is probably familiar with this topic because coaching is such an integral part of sports.
Yeah.
Where it's like they point out the blind spots. You can't see, your pedal stroke maybe is like a little bit off, or your knees flaring out a little bit on your stroke, or some little weird thing that you're not aware of, that a coach can reflect to you and show you your blind spots and things that you probably aren't aware of that could be holding you back. And the same goes in my space. Oftentimes guys just they don't see the ways that they're showing up that are holding them back, or the ways they're preventing their relationships from working better, or, just from like dealing with their emotions and letting things get, like there's so much to it that, we just being willing to bring on support to help us grow is such a big piece of the equation. It's huge.
Yeah. No, it's having those, like I call them outside eyes that can see the athlete from a different point of view that they'll never actually be able to see because they're literally not outside of themselves. So
100%.
for athletes listening, that the power of a coach is huge. They see things that you literally cannot see, and if you're open-minded about it, you can level up if you're willing to try some new stuff. It makes me think, James, of when I was bike racing. Quick story here. I wanted to get better at climbing mountains, and if I was doing any kind of a hilly race had to climb over 1,000 or 2,000 feet, I couldn't hang. And so I tried something new. I worked with this guy who got me on a diet, and I went vegan for a while. and I lost like 6 pounds off of my racing weight.
Huh.
And I started climbing really fast. And I had another guy, a friend of mine who was not really a coach, more of a mentor, and he was a good climber. And I just obeyed all of his advice, like do this before a climb, relax. It was all about relaxing coming into a climb. And I used these things. And prior to that, I was not that coachable. It was kind of like when things got bad enough, like I needed a coach. Like, look, I'm getting dropped in all these races. Something's got to change, right? And that's when a coach can come in. And I think you may see this. You get people who are coming in more at a necessity for a coach, of desperation, or like things have gotten bad and I really need a coach. Wouldn't it be nice though if people came to us proactively? You know?
And there's the odd one that does. It's rare.
Yeah.
A lot of that ties into this idea of willingness, which is, there has to, like you said, it often does take things getting bad enough that you're like, okay, like I need some help. Like I clearly don't have these things figured out. So I'm willing to like surrender and, like you said, be teachable, be coachable, and listen, take someone's advice who maybe knows a way that I could do better.
Well, it makes me think about, being ripe for therapy, being ripe for counseling, being ripe for coaching. There is something to that. And I think with the younger athletes, they're much more coachable just because they haven't been set in their ways and mindset. And that's not to say that older athletes or older folks can't be coachable, but I think with the older you are, maybe there's a little more resistance. You have to be a little more riper than, say, like someone like a teenager who's like, yeah, I have no experience, and so if I'm going to listen to everything you say,
Totally. And it's just you're at a different phase of life as well. Like most kids they're used to being told what to do because they're in school all day, and they're used to kind of having someone guiding and kind of showing them the path in a lot of different areas of life, versus if you take on someone in their 40s or 50s who's already very established and has done well in life, that their ego has grown a lot more, to the point where it takes a lot more for them to be willing to let down their armor and take advice on big things, especially around like relationships and health, and like change big patterns that have served them probably quite well throughout their life, but are also preventing them from achieving what they actually want.
Yeah, definitely. James, I want to shift gears a little bit in talking about about the concept of men's groups. I know you run a number of those. I'm just starting to get into that, realizing the power of a group. And talk a little bit about how you decided to get into the groups, and maybe some of the initial challenges as a facilitator of these groups.
For sure. That idea of ego is probably the main one.
Yeah.
Sitting down and wrangling a whole bunch of egos is always quite challenging. Where I got in myself, I was at a point in my life where I was really on that kind of grind hustle mentality of like working and building a side business, but in the mornings getting up at 4 and doing that whole thing. And I just wasn't really socializing at all. And I knew a bunch of guys that were in this one group that were all guys that I looked up to, that were more successful than me, that were, more on the kind of conscious side. And they're guys that I wanted to be like, essentially, and surround myself with, because I'd known for a long time that the results you achieve in life are often very connected to the people you hang out with. And so that was a big part of my motivation originally. I got into a group to essentially, like, my thought was, I'm going to just batch my friend time. I'm like, if I join this group, I'll get to see a bunch of these guys that I know and some ones that I don't know every week. And I'll keep getting to build those relationships. And I won't have to try to connect regularly and make all these individual hangs when I just don't have time for that right now. So that was my motivation. What I got out of it was a million times more. I had no idea. I'd done a lot of work. I'd already gone to school for coaching and NLP, and had, delved into the plant medicine world. I'd done a lot of stuff in this personal development, spiritual development space. And when I got into men's work, I learned about the idea of the father wound, which was a big one for me. And just kind of this whole idea of like essentially depth psychology, where looking at your relationship with your father, with your mother, from like from the beginning, and seeing that so many of the patterns that we have in our relationships with our mom and our dad translate into pretty much everything in our life, into how we relate with other men, into how we relate for our relationship with our father connects to how we relate with the men, with structure, with money, with purpose, with work in general and authority. Like there's so many layers to it. And I personally, my biological father left before I was born, and I had a stepdad that came in, but I never really got along with him very well. So I always had this kind of fractured relationship with the masculine, and I didn't even really see that or realize that until getting into this work and starting to dig into it. And that had kind of manifested in this place of I was easy to make friends, and I just didn't have the confidence in myself to go out and crush it in business. I didn't have the confidence to crush sales, to be at that top level in sports. I was always pretty good, but never like at the very top, because there was a lot of these issues around confidence and things that were really connected to the fact that I had a huge hole in my heart that got formed by my dad leaving before I was even born. And I wasn't aware of that at the time, but since getting into men's work and starting to look at all this stuff, I just realized how much like pain there was there, and how much healing was required. And the beautiful thing about these groups is you can, if you were to do counseling or therapy with your parents, you could dig into some of these things, but most people that I know's parents aren't into that. And there's a really beautiful thing that happens in men's groups where we can start to heal our relationship with the masculine through the other men in the group, through the processes that you do, through being willing to just be vulnerable and take off your armor and ask for the support you need, and talk about the things that are going on in your life. It's for guys especially, it's kind of a foreign thing that not many guys do on their own. And women tend to band together and talk about their emotions, talk about the things that are going on in their lives a little more naturally. It's more of a just thing that women do. Yep. Whereas men tend to need some guidance and some structure and some encouragement to do this. Where men are more societally programmed to like go be a soldier, get stuff done, work hard, make money, and don't have emotions, don't be weak, don't do any of these things that are perceived as weak. And that creates a lot of suffering. And that having a space where we get to talk about these things, where we get to ask for support, where we get to practice expressing the range of our emotions, allowing ourselves to be angry and to go into our anger, go into our sadness, be held in these spaces. It's so healing and so powerful. And I'm really grateful that this work is spreading and more guys are getting into this, because there's like the suicide rates for men are like 5 times higher than women. It's like there's a lot of men that just suffer in silence and then escape somehow like that, or either in the extreme way with suicide, or are just numbing out with video games, with drinking, with smoking, with other drugs. Pornography is a huge one, obviously. There's a lot of guys that are just trying to self-medicate through escaping, as opposed to talking about the things that are going on and allowing themselves to be supported and getting their life on track so that they're moving towards some sort of purpose, getting their health in order, cleaning up all these addictions, and just dialing in their life. And men's groups, there's lots of different varieties out there, obviously, and they all have like different flavors, but this idea of just coming together and talking about the things that are going on in your life is usually a core element of most groups. And it's so simple, but also so potent and powerful, and it has so much capacity for helping us heal.
So I love that. Yeah. So it makes me, when I'm listening to this, it's making me think of 2 things. Number one's like stoicism, which I would consider kind of like a masculine strength of pushing through, and not being ashamed of that. And then also being vulnerable and opening up, and knowing that as a man you can have the whole buffet, right? So you can have that natural kind of stoicism, then you can also be with a group of guys and share your experiences and normalize trauma, normalize stuff that we've all gone through. Like everyone's got something that happened somewhere. And if you're with a group, I think what that does, James, is it reduces shame. I think that's a big thing. I've seen this in my therapy practice and also with athletes. is this shame, and it usually happens, it's like an internalized thing, like I failed or I didn't quite meet my goals. And instead of leaning on a group, I'm going to, ruminate on this alone. I'm going to isolate socially, right? And I'm going to just turn all my frustration inward. When, again, if you have the full buffet and you can meet with a group of guys, it could be more formally in a group or just hanging out with your guy friends and opening up and just normalize, like, hey man, I'm just feeling really down about this, and hey bro, it's okay. Like, that is the full buffet of, like, you can have it all. And I think it's just wonderful, the work that you're doing. And I think it's just the fact that we're talking about this right now and people are listening to this, I think is helping people, because they're realizing that, yes, it is okay to talk about this stuff. Everyone's going through something. And I would just encourage men listening, women listening, anybody listening, like, lean on your friends. If you flip the script and you had a friend come to you and say, hey, I'm feeling really down, I'm ashamed of this and that, you probably wouldn't say, like, I don't really care, toughen up. Hopefully you wouldn't say that, right? You'd probably be more like, hey, tell me more. Like, it's okay. Like, you're okay. And if you think about it that way, like, people do want to hear about your problems. They want to hear about your struggles. They want to hear about your successes. They want to hear everything. So again, great work that you're doing, James. I would love to talk longer. Maybe we can do a part 2, but we do have to kind of wrap up here. Maybe just real quickly, one thing I wanted to ask you about was breath work. I know you do a lot of that in your groups and yourself. Have you seen a benefit for athletes in doing breath work?
Definitely. Breath work is both physical and like emotional, mental, spiritual. Like, there's growth to be had in all the areas through something like that. Obviously, if you're breathing more, it's changing the chemistry of your blood. It's making you healthier. It's helping you kind of release things. But also on the more kind of inner side, all these things that you're holding on to that weigh you down emotionally and mentally and traumatically, all these type of things, athletes will be held back by that too. If you're willing to, like, let things go and be more present, be more calm, let go of things that you're holding on to that aren't serving you anymore, that's going to make you better at your sport.
Yeah.
If you're not as weighed down by stress and anxiety, or if you're not as, like, freaked out about something that happened, or if when you have a practice like breath work where you can drop in, like, get into your emotions, just like shake off whatever it is that you're holding on to, so you can be freer and calmer and more focused, you're going to be better at your sport. It's kind of a no-brainer. They're very intertwined, especially at high level, as we talked about, because once you're competing and at a high level, it's so much more mental anyways. It's like being able to be present, being able to be in the game and get into flow state. And when you have, like, stresses and anxieties and things that are, like, weighing you down, it makes it harder to be in flow, and that makes it harder to perform your best. So the clearer you are, the better you're going to perform. So
yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so something as basic as the breath can get you in that meditative flow state. It can reduce stress, all these things.
On that note, like, just quickly, breath work can be a lot of different things. There's lots of different, like, yogic breath and pranayama that are more like, there's certain practices like box breathing, for instance, like 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold, that you can use in the moment. Like, say you're in the start gate, or you're about to step up to the bat, or at the start line of a race or whatever, you can do some of these simple practices to just calm your nervous system and get yourself into more of a state of calm and of safety, so that you can, again, then perform your best. The stuff that I do with more of my groups is a style called conscious connected breathing, which is, like, longer. It's like an hour-long process where you lie down, you get into these deep breathing, and you're getting more into the emotional body and really purging a lot of stuck emotions and screaming and yelling and crying and, like, just letting out things that you've been holding on to for a really long time. So very different, also both very applicable. There's tons of different types of breath that can like ramp you up and calm you down and help you heal and move things stuck in your system. So it's a deep rabbit hole of all the different styles, but definitely can be useful. Both like there's certain tools like box breathing that I mentioned that can be useful like in the moment when you're in your sport, and there's other things that can be used like as part of your training essentially to help you perform better when you are on the field. So
awesome. I love it. So many tools out there that we can use. James Bravelove, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. I want to talk with you more. Super fascinating work that you do there at Alpha Rising. Tell the folks listening and viewing this where they can find your programs, more about you.
100%. Few options. Instagram is a big one. alpharising.menswork on their website, alpha-rising.com. And through the podcast, we're on Apple and Spotify at Men Doing the Work. So those are the best places to hop on to learn more about what we're about. There's lots of links to connect with me. I respond to all the DMs on Instagram if you want to hit me up on there. And yeah, just start bringing curiosity to your path, to your growth. And if you're willing to take on that idea of being teachable and coachable, and you're just going to keep going up, So
awesome. So be curious, be coachable, everybody. James, thanks so much for being on the show today. Thank you, everyone, for listening, tuning in. We'll see you all next time. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode with James. It really is about doing the work. And one of the best ways to work on yourself is to find a group of people who encourage you to level up. So be sure to check out James's coaching programs at Alpha Rising. That's alpha-rising.com. If you're interested in working with me, Michael Ceely, you can check out my mindset coaching programs at michaelceely.com. Until next time, keep on leveling up.